everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. And today I'm joined by Donald Smith, director and founder of the Scottish International Storytelling Festival, and a whole lot more. Hello, Donald.
Hello, Alistair.
So, before we get on to more personal matters, can you tell us about this year's festival?
Northern Connections, Lights of the North is the sort of tag or theme of the festival. And we're really looking at those links, particularly obviously through storytelling, and they're in the music and all sorts of other aspects of the culture between Scotland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, the north of Germany, up into the Baltics. So there's a whole kind of northern brew going on there, and has been going on for centuries, if not millennia. And so it's a very rich kind of, a rich brew, shall we say, of storytelling that arises from there. And the festival keeps up that sense of connection and sharing and being inspired really by each other's tales and experiences.
I think that's right. Perhaps some people don't realise just how strong that connection is and how long that connection is. They maybe think of places like Stornoway and some of the islands, but particularly the East Coast and our near neighbours across the way, there are so many links there.
Totally. And of course, the languages thing comes into play. There's strong Scots connection, there's Gaelic connection. And most of these, the Scandinavian, the Nordic countries, so Iceland doesn't think of itself as being Scandinavian, they also have languages and regional dialects, and that come through in the storytelling, the song, and the music side of things. So there's a lot to celebrate at a time when we're thinking a lot about the kind of environment that, the relationship between our culture and the natural setting in which we live, and how we keep those in harmony, if you like. And so all of that's in the mix.
And can you tell us some of the people who are taking part? I don't expect you to be able to tell.
No. Well, I mean, it always seems insidious mentioned with storytelling is such a community, really, of different storytellers. But let me mention a couple of interesting Scottish storytellers that have contributed a lot to this. So up there in Orkney, you've got Tom Muir, who is an amazing Orkney storyteller and folklorist, who has really spent decades of his life building up these connections between Orkney and Shetland, between Orkney and Sweden, between Orkney and Norway, between Orkney and Iceland, and all the rest of it. And there's quite a number of guests, coming from these countries that have had a link through that network of Orkney and Shetland. So, and then over to the west, although he's an interesting character, Ian Stephen, because he's got a mixed inheritance from Fraserburgh in the northeast and Stornoway and Lewis. And Ian was a Coast Guard before he got into storytelling culture, and he, believe it or not, has sailed to the festival via Iceland, having gone right round Iceland. This is in a sail-driven boat, then across to the Faroes, and to the back home to the west. And I mean, he's been a great connector, and so these festivals, we don't pull them out of the sack like some kind of magic. A lot of connection and work has gone in, and that then comes so you get the friendships, you get the people rubbing alongside each other. Another example of that, storytellers, Ruth Kirkpatrick, so one of our great Scots Northeast storytellers. So she's been working with Irish storytellers on the Seal people's stories. So it's just over 100 years since we got David Thompson's book, The Seal People, which is a wonderful journey around the coasts of Ireland and Scotland in search of these Selkie stories in their own locations. So Ruth and Colin Irwin, who's a storyteller and folklorist from the Glens of Antrim, I put together a show celebrating that book. So there's many more to mention. There's a group of younger women storytellers are looking at the story of, sometimes she's called Enoch in Glasgow, St. Enoch, Bennu, Tenach, the story of the woman who's the mother of St. Mungo, the founder of Glasgow. Now that's an amazing sea story. You know, she's cast out to sea in the Forth and bumps ashore in the Isle of May where she's able to get fresh water. So that whole connection with the sea is very big in all this, as you would expect. So that's just some of the storytellers from home and further afield that will be with us.
What comes through when you're talking there is that often these stories are shared in different spaces and different places. And then when we now, can connect them and talk about them, you say, oh, that's very similar to something that perhaps was the north of Scotland to the west coast of Ireland to, to Cornwall or something like that. A lot of places which are similar have shared stories.
They do. And it's lovely it's kind of like it's the same, but it's a bit different, or it's a bit different, but it's also the same. So that's part of the joy of it, the fun of it. And there's a big lore around that Selkie thing, for instance. There's ballads and all sorts of stuff. So, I mean, that's another part of all this, this kind of narrative art, really, because it's narrative art as well as tradition. It's in the ballads and songs as well as the stories, a close connection between all that. And you see the same things going on as you're saying in these different cultures. But it makes for, so the key thing, of course, storytelling is about the listening as well as the telling. So the thing is that it's the mix of the contributions, the sharing, through what they used to call in the Western Isles a storytelling ceilidh, where people are coming and contributing, and you're coming and you're expecting to give a story, but as the old proverb says, you give one story to get 10 back. And so people make these connections for themselves. It's not a passive thing. You don't need to be an artistic critic writing a column for one of our great national papers. Because actually people are doing it for themselves. They're making those connections in their imaginations and in their feelings.
And are there strands to the festival?
Yeah, so the festival is all over Scotland. So one of the big strands is what we call Go Local, where we're partnering up with local art centres and festivals. So there's events on in Orkney itself, not just Orkney being represented at the Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh. There's a big Northeast festival where we have GAS, the Grampian Associations of Storytellers. There's the Wild Goose Festival we're partnering with in Dumfriesshire. And along the coast in Galloway, there's events in Fife, there's events in West Lothian, there's events in Clackmannanshire and the Hill Foots. So that's an important part of it. And some of the visitors who are coming in from further afield, they'll not be stuck in Edinburgh. They're going out to get involved in that. So one of the Finnish storytellers visiting, she'll be going to Dumfries and Galloway, as well as performing at the Storytelling Centre. So that's quite a big part of it, is that Go Local. And then, as you say, those kind of international partnerships and connections that will feature in different sessions at the Storytelling Centre. And those range from quite sort of developed kind of performances. You almost feel you're back in the the chief's hall or the feasting, and there's a bit of high art with the music and the story. And then also more relaxed, what we call open hearths, which
Mhm.
are just an exchange of story and music by three or four, a musician and a couple of storytellers, or two and two and a host. You see these different kinds of events flagged up, and the thing is, what people do, as is over the years, people find their own way through it. They pick the journey that they want, and you can get a festival pass, which gives you a big reduction in tickets, and then you can use that to follow the threads that you want to bring together in your experience of the festival. Yeah,
We should let people know where they can find out about the program and get their
yeah,
passes, the tickets.
yeah, yeah. So they just go on to www Scottish International Storytelling Festival, and they'll get right on to, you get the whole program there, straight on to the online booking system as well, and it's pretty well kind of set up and accessible for people to get into. Yeah,
And it seems to me there that a big part of what the festival involves is traveling. And of course, traveling has been hugely important in the sharing of
yeah,
stories.
yeah. So I mean, I don't know where you start with that. It's like people on a journey. A journey is a story. A story is a journey. So there's that at the kind of almost level of metaphor or whatever. But then also, that was one of the circumstances in which people got sharing stories. And one of the great contributors to our tradition, who kept things alive when there was huge official neglect, if not hostility, to these traditions, is Scotland's travelling people,
Mhm.
who moved between every part of Scotland and Ireland, picking up the stories. So that then became the campfire. At the end of each day, that was the means of entertainment, of reflecting on the day's experiences, on passing on culture, on looking at places that they had passed through or seen, and knowing that there are stories connected with those places. I remember, I mean, one of the great privileges and joys of having been involved with this over a number of decades is getting to know storytellers and being out and about in the country with them, or the town. There's an urban working class community thing as well, and just going round with people in familiar places and then sharing some of the stories and traditions connected with those places. So it's often not a static thing. It could be an on the move thing, taking us out and about, into the environment, into the culture, into the experiences of people,
I love,
past,
I love
present.
that idea that people coming can almost create their own festival program. They can,
Yeah,
and that includes a level of travel as well. And
totally.
this is the 36th festival,
Yeah, yeah, apparently.
but it's also, I believe, it's also your last.
Yeah, so the last is director.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll be banning me totally, and maybe they should though. Maybe they should, and yeah. So it's time. I'm just about to turn 70, and it's some time past. I stood down as director of the Storytelling Festival. Centre, kept
Yeah.
working with the festival, and the time's come to hand on to new leadership. Because one of the amazing things is to have watched. When I started out in the late 70s in the whole Scottish arts and culture thing, it was very hard to find anybody working for any major Scottish, so-called Scottish arts organisation who actually had a knowledge or background in Scottish culture. It was extraordinarily rare. And yeah, I'm not griping about that. It was just the way the system had worked. But what I've watched and seen is now really three generations of talent and interest coming up. So we're in a whole different ballgame. And I've seen it amidst the storytelling community.
Yeah.
Young storytellers coming in, and as I put it, I began with some of the great grandparents, the Sheila Stewarts and the Willie McPhees, whatever. I felt those were the great grandparents of the storytelling tradition, Betsy White and all the rest of it. And I mean, we're 4 generations on. And the wonderful thing is there's another crop of people with all different interests and backgrounds from all different parts of the country coming in and getting involved. So yeah, there's just a moment you have to say, let it go, let it thrive. Yeah.
And I mean, I know you're busy at the moment looking towards the festival, but are you able at all to reflect on the past, or is that going to come afterwards, do you think?
No, no. I mean, I'm always you get a wee bit older in life, and the memories flood back in some ways. And yeah, yeah. And I say the overwhelming thing that I feel, and you don't have to lost any of it, is these friendships and connections, and especially amid Scottish travelling people, that was a big experience for me. Their generosity in sharing their traditions, but also people from all other walks of life who got involved. And storytelling is like it is a sharing of experiences. There's a kind of personal dimension to it, community dimension to it, and yeah, I just it's been a very very rich journey, and I don't regret any of it. Yeah.
What is it about storytelling itself that kind of inspired you and ignites such passion?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you a specific. Along the way, there's been a few Damascus Road experiences, and one of those, 1979, right? So that's the year we had the failed
Hmm.
devolution referendum. Mrs. Thatcher was elected. My God, everything was going on. But that year, in April of that year, there was a revived Edinburgh International Folk Festival.
Okay.
And I spent the whole week at it, going to everything. And one of the events was Belle Stewart and her daughter Sheila
Mhm.
doing a wee two-hander performance. I was in the old university staff club or somewhere, whatever. And I go along and Belle's doing her traditional songs. And of course, it was Belle was the boss and Sheila, she got her slots kind of thing. But in the middle of it, Sheila stood up and she launched into this story, which she calls Orangey and Apley, about the two wee lassies and the one that's killed, and the mother serves the lassie up to the father in a soup.
Wow.
And actually, later I was to find out this was one of the most popular traditional folk tales in the whole of Scottish culture, called The Little White Dew. But what wowed me was Sheila Stewart's, the artistry of it. She just got up on her hind legs. And I mean, this is not, oh, I'm going to tell you a wee story. Wham! And I thought, my God, what is going on here? And because what I could see was there was an artistry, there was a power about this. There was generations of talent and experience behind it, but she had a capacity just to get up and embody this story and and I thought, blimey, I need to know more about this. And that's one of the interesting things. And it's true, of course, that everybody can tell a story. And that's part of the strength of it. Everybody can share a story. It's a community tradition, but there's an art, there's a power in it to be able to bring this story alive in people's minds and emotions in this live moment of the telling. Is very, very powerful. And that's something Sheila herself, when I got to know her, she had a name, she called it the cognac. The cognac, she said, that this is the inspiration and power of the moment that takes over, that's something bigger than the individual storyteller or singer and the audience. And she was so right and true about that. And that's something I've always kind of respected and tried to encourage people's sense of confidence in digging deep into this storytelling art. And then you see that, of course, when you get the cross-cultural thing and you see Scotland, what's happened in Ireland, what happens in Africa, in India, in other parts. And you see it's a worldwide thing.
Yeah.
To be able to create this narrative experience out of nothing,
Yeah.
out of the emotions, the gestures. So in the age of multimedia, this is the art of simplification, but it's the art of simplification with tremendous power and effect. So that was one of the moments along the way I thought, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. And of course, in a way, the storytelling had been a bit neglected.
Mm-hmm.
The folk music was at the front end of the folk revival. Fantastic. But you see, what was interesting, that so many of these people, Jeannie Robertson, Stanley Robertson, her nephew, Duncan Williamson, a lot of these people who were involved, who were first recognized as singers, they were also storytellers.
Yeah.
And sort of just bringing that aspect to the fore was just, being able to open a door. And the generosity, as I say, of the people who had that culture, who could have been a bit suspicious. Were they being exploited? Were they going to be patronized or whatever? But no, they stepped forward with great confidence. And I mean, I started a kind of renaissance in the whole thing.
It strikes me just as you're talking that description could be applied to one of our most famous sons, Billy Connolly, who's a storyteller who started out in the folk.
Totally. Totally. So I spent part of my childhood in Partick. And funnily enough, one of the most interesting, I'm very enthusiastic about the Scots language. And I was asked to help prepare the Open University free course on Scots. And I was asked to look at comedy and storytelling. And I went through all the old comedy stuff, Harry Lauder and all that stuff, Chick Murray and whatever. And I went through every recording you could find of Billy Connolly, a lot of which I had heard either live or whatever. And the man's a genius. The man is a storytelling genius. He has utterly got that capacity to take people along with him out of nothing in a way. But also, and this is again this thing about cultural confidence and class and recognition, that he turned the thing in its head. So instead of there being a sort of superior, posh Anglo-Scots thing looking down at Scots, and Glaswegian is Scots, he turned it in his head and he made the posh, artificial Anglo-Scots ridiculous. And he put the people's language back center stage. It's an amazing contribution. Yeah. So, I mean, there's folk tradition, there's the travellers, but I mean, this is something that's very broadly in the culture. And there were people in Edinburgh Old Town, like John Fee, who came from the Irish community in the Old Town, old generations of famous boxers, actually. And John, I mean, that access to a grassroots culture there, that again, there was tremendous artistry in it about the sense of place and the community and the culture. And there was a kind of mix of the Irish and Scottish in that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The more you dig, the richer it gets.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
In my view.
And I didn't realise till I read a piece that was sent to me that you were a child of the manse. You were brought up in the church. And you're also a student of Edinburgh University. And I just wondered, did both religion and education influence you in different ways?
Yes, they did. And although in both cases, the There was so I mean on the positive front, the whole church manse thing at the time in the 1950s when I in the 60s when I'd been brought up in that, there was still a sense in which the church had a quite central place in the community. A lot went on in the community, come out through it, and I learned an awful lot from that. At the same time, I had a bit of a rebellion against it all. At later times, I had been an adopted child, twice actually adopted, and it was I just as I came into the 70s and coming up into young adulthood and whatever, I could feel this needs to change.
Mm.
Where this whole church thing is aligning itself with a kind of conservative, sort of middle class, slightly snooty kind of thing was going on there, and I thought this isn't the future. This is going to have to change, and also I with education I hugely benefit. Stirling High School, Edinburgh University, but there was a moment I had to make my break, and for me, the moment of the break was when I went to the School of Scottish Studies.
Yeah.
And that was because of Hamish Henderson. And that was another of these light bulb moments. I didn't know who Hamish Henderson was. In Church of Scotland manses, we weren't brought up in the folk revival, or not in most of them anyway, went back. And then I remember it was 70, was it 78 or 79? Odysseus Elaeus was awarded the Nobel Prize for literature, the poet, Greek poet, and Democrat, and resistance leader, and all the rest of it. And the Greek students threw a party to celebrate this, and I went along. I was invited, and here's this fella acting as the kind of fair and tie, as they say, the host of the night, in this old jumbly woolly cardigan hanging down with this untidy mane of white hair. And this guy gets up, and it's just this kind of flow. One minute he's in Greek and Gaelic and Scots and bits of Latin, and he's singing snatches of this, and he's pulling people out. And I thought, bloody hell, what is this? And I found this is Hamish Henderson. A Scottish cultural activist, folk scholar, folk collector, poet himself, speaker of Greek, Gaelic, whatever. And it was through that I was just drawn into this thing, that there was something going on in the whole Scottish cultural scene that formal education up to that point had not really accommodated or recognized. If anything, it was pushing back against it.
Yeah.
And School of Scottish Studies, that was just, again, it was just one of these huge eye-openers. And and I never looked back from that in a way, because then I knew that in whatever form, and I didn't know what form it was going to be, and it wasn't exactly that there was a rash of well-paid jobs looking out there in Scottish culture. But I just knew, in my gut that this is where I'm going. This is what I want to be part of, So I can't complain about any of those things. But I suppose 70s idea, there's something about 70, and I remember in 78 going and hearing the first reading of The Chariot, the Stag, and the Black Oil. And, there was something really brewing, politically, culturally. And I sort of went with that flow, and then found my own bits of things to get on with in it.
It's incredible to think how things have changed. I studied at the Department of Scottish Literature at Glasgow University, but that hadn't been around that long, and I was there in the late 90s. And now you have departments, in many different institutions and open university courses and so much more. So it really has changed quite a bit. And you mentioned the Scottish Storytelling Centre, and you've been involved with that for a long time as well.
Yeah, so getting these things that we fell into. So it started, the Netherbow Art Centre was there before on that site, which was a small theatre art centre. And I was finishing the School of Scottish Studies, and somebody said to me, they're in a bit of a mess down there. They need somebody to go for 6 weeks and help them out, you know. And 44 years later, I was still there, you know. But you see, there was a thing there because of this slightly changed thing, you know. It belonged to the Church of Scotland. It was the successor
Right.
to the Gateway Theatre, and they didn't quite know what to do with it. And to begin with, the Young Lyceum Company were in there actually when it was first built. So there's this fantastic little theatre and an amazing location. And I thought, wow, what could we do with this? You know? And the answer was a lot.
Well, for listeners
You
who
know?
don't know, it's on the Royal Mile. It's an incredible
Yeah,
location. You could not get
it
really
is.
more
It
central.
is.
And whenever the Fringe is on and people say to me, "Oh, it's so much on, I don't know what to
Yeah, yeah,
choose," I say, "Look at the programme of the Scottish
yeah.
Storytelling Centre because you will not be disappointed. You will
There's
find
always something
something
interesting.
always."
And the also the kind of people friendly aspect of it. You know, it doesn't jam people in. I think sometimes at the Fringe, it's like market day. It's like being a sheep in the market. You know, you're shoved from this pen to the next pen to the next pen. And they don't do that stuff. The Storytelling Centre is very welcoming. It's got this ethos, and it's a nice laid out welcoming, and I mean it includes the old John Knox house, which of course John Knox probably died in, but it was never his house, but it was the house of James Mossman, the Royal Goldsmith. And I mean, just that's another bit of extraordinary cultural, you know, treasure sitting there. So it's a great location, halfway down the mile, you know. And storytelling just is a great way of making that hospitable
Yeah.
and open to many different voices, you know.
But it strikes me that such places are increasingly important because going back to the church, you know, a lot of people used to meet up at church halls and tell their stories, and
Yeah,
let's move that on to pubs. There's a lot of
yeah,
pub, you know, a lot of pubs
yeah,
disappearing
yeah,
as well. Another place where people would meet and share stories. Is that a concern that
yeah.
these
It
spaces
is,
are less than they were?
and that's why one of the most important aspects of the whole storytelling thing is not the festival, although it feeds into the festival, but the national network of storytellers in all parts of Scotland. There's about 160 of them who are working away at community level, creating those kind of opportunities, whether it be with libraries or community groups, to enable that sense of storytelling and human connection to happen. Because the great danger of where we are is, and I don't blame it. I'm not an anti-technology. You know, social media can play its completely positive role in this. And during the COVID lockdown, storytelling thrived on the social media. But what you have, which is more alarming, damaging, is this people who just stick to their own like-minded people.
Yeah.
So it's like reinforcing echoes. And you get this kind of these subcultures developing where people are not listening. They're not open to what are the experiences of others. And, you know, we're seeing all this in the resurgence, really, of racism and kind of hostility to people who are in some way different. And storytelling always had that capacity to, you know, there was the tradition in the Cayley house. So a story from the man or woman of the house and a story from each of the guests until dawn, Bula. And that was that thing that everybody should have the opportunity, if they wished, to put their experience, their perspective into the mix. And that we desperately need that. We desperately need that in human societies. Yeah.
Well, I've written down here actually an essential part of storytelling is to create empathy and greater understanding, because then you find out that your neighbor or the next person or the next country has
Exactly.
more that unites us than divides us, I think, and
Utterly,
storytelling.
utterly. And I think that's, that's very much in the heart of that storytelling thing. And so that's where, part of the skill, I think, of working in storytelling now, voluntary, community, making part of your living from it, is that it's a way of enabling that sharing of experience. So there's a lot more to it than, one person standing up there and haranguing the rest.
Mhm.
It's opening up. And I sometimes the joke say, people say to me, well, Donald, well, what are you going to do if you return? I say, well, I'm going to chat. I'm going to do a lot of chatting, because yeah, I'll tell you, I'll give you an example that's interesting. So, a couple of years back, just in the back of the COVID lockdown, I had cancer, prostate cancer, and which was treated, but that put me into a hole. So I'd never really had major ill health before, and that put me into a whole thing. I was going to these clinics and these radiotherapy sessions, and everywhere you were meeting people who were all at different stages or coming into this in different angles. And there was an amazing solidarity in the conversation, in the chat, where, you've had people, so they were maybe at a slightly different stage, or their experience was different, or maybe their challenges were a bit different, but we were all somehow in that same boat. And that's of course why they created those Maggie's centres.
Mhm.
So there's an aspect of something that so many people live with, illness or disability of some kind, and to be able to share those experiences, and just to have human connection and stories and experiences is health giving. It's part of people's well-being.
It's so interesting because I think now we're actually encouraged to talk more about things that previously we probably didn't talk about than ever before.
Exactly. That was it was the great. And see, that's where, and again, it's this mix of culture and religion, but that's something, I got very interested in and dug back into, because it was partly in my own, cultural inheritance and stuff. But so there was, I think, in the kind of Calvinist version of Protestantism that we had, and we also had a very puritanical version of Roman Catholicism as well, post the Irish famine. There was a repression. There was no, don't talk about your experiences. They're not important. That's not what's of value. Talk about, just listen to what your duty is, to what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that was a huge disabling thing
Mhm.
in Scottish life and culture. And well, you're describing the Scottish literature thing there. It comes out again and again and again, Robin Jenkins, Ian Crichton Smith, all this stuff. And yeah, and I think there's something in the older storytelling traditions, which are also can be fresh and new in community now, that's got the opposite philosophy. Let's open up, let's share, let's listen, let's have some confidence in our ability to deal with these things, to respond to them. Yeah, not to be hod and doon. And to hear the younger voices, because I mean that was another thing when I was brought up,
Yeah.
kids, shut your face.
Did you not
Who
heard?
who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Get back in your corner.
Yeah.
That's not. It's
And
not.
also, in terms of storytelling, a lot of people might think, everyone tells stories. Of course they do. It's absolutely most democratic. You don't need a
No,
piece of paper and a pen or some
no.
paints and it's there to do it.
Yeah.
And the more you tell and the more you share, perhaps as you say, the better you get at it. The more you tell your stories, it really can be powerful.
But your point is equally made, that at the heart of it is that just that enjoyment and ability to share experience tell. So I'll give you another of my Damascus Road
Yep.
experiences here, right? There's these wee things along the road you just never forget. So it's a January night. This would be late 80s. January night in Skin Flats, right? Out in the Forth Estuary. I don't know
Right.
if you know where
I
Skin
don't know. I
Flats is.
don't.
Well, as it's not one of Scotland's greatest beauty spots, shall we say. They're an absolutely freezing night, and there's this cold har, is rolled in off the river over the flats and all the rest of it. You're near Larbert and all that kind of stuff. And I was due to go to give a talk to a women's group in a church hall about the Netherbow. So this was before we totally got into the storytelling thing in a public way about sort of the arts in Scotland and the theatre and all this. And I arrive at the venue, and I mean, it was perishing, Alistair. It was perishing. And I'm looking out, and there's a kind of, there's two folks with Zimmers there, and there's a lady there wrapped up in her coat and all the rest of it. And they started off with the minutes of the previous thing where some nursing officer had been to talk about the change of life. And I thought, oh God, I hope they don't think this is part two. But anyway, and I looked out at that and I thought, do these people want to know about the work at the Netherbow Arts Centre? And Scots, I thought, no, they don't. And I just said, well, I said, I come tonight and, it's very cold and I think we should share a few stories. And, by this time, I was absorbing this and I just started and I told them a story. It was maybe one of Duncan Williams' story. And then I told them another story. And I could see them coming to life. It was like, they were there to suffer, to endure, to get through that night, It was their duty to turn out at this thing. And
Another very
suddenly,
Calvinist approach to the
the
matter.
shoulders went up, the thing, and by the end of it, they were all coming forward, saying, "Oh, son, that was great." And I said, "No." And there was a woman. She said, "I mind we were wee, and we lived on a farm just up there in Slamanan, and there was no electric light, and in winter night, we sat around the fireside and tell tales, and I thought, wow, it was one of those things. I just thought, this is what people in communities need. They don't they don't need an agenda about the specialist and this, that, and the next thing coming. It's because actually these are their
Yeah.
stories that belong to them, and I never forgot that. And of course, though you pay the price. There's this woman going out. She said, "Ah, son, that was great." She says, "I'm going to recommend you." I thought, oh no.
They'll be back. They'll want you back.
No, no,
Now, well, I guess all your time and thought is with the festival, but have you thought about what might come next for you?
Yeah, so the storytelling's part of my I'm going to go on doing community storytelling and help out. So I don't need to be, we've got our National Storytellers Network. I'll still be involved in that, helping out others, contributing where I can, and but not in the kind of not having those sort of leadership responsibilities. And that'd be great in a way, it does release you. I've got a lot of wee projects, like different angles and story sources and traditions that I'm interested in this whole connection between Scotland and Ireland, because that's my own family background and makeup. And so while I've still, got a bit of VIP, I'm going to get involved in all that. I've got 7 grandchildren. So
You're going to be kept busy no matter what.
Dad, you are needed at such and such, so all of that. So it's back to this thing that what I take, what I gained through the storytelling thing was a lot of cultural knowledge and interest, but basically a community of friendship, and that doesn't change, and I hope to be out and about helping people and contributing to keeping this thing changing and evolving and alive, and being able to share some of the stories and experiences that I've been lucky to gain. I also I feel quite a sense of responsibility. You feel these generations on your shoulder. It comes back to me, these memories of some of these amazing people who kept these storytelling traditions alive, and a huge admiration for them. I would like them not to be forgotten. There's the stories, and there's the storytellers, the people who tell the stories, or told the stories. They're both all very interesting. And yeah, and it's a kind of like, I think it's at community level
Yeah.
that should go on. I mean, there's a certain amount of academic interest in that, but that's not the main thing in it, nor has it ever been, probably. Although it's important to
Yeah.
research, but I don't see myself as, I'm not going to write a set of learned books. No.
Increasingly, I think that the kind of most important role in art and culture more generally is a greater sense of community and understanding. Yes, there are ivory towers and all those kind of things that we know and probably were taught at some point, but actually that's not as important as what you're suggesting.
I feel not, and I mean it's each to their own. I'm not a. It's funny. People spend a lot of time critiquing the others, and that could be quite interesting. But I think being appreciative of what's going on and what people are up to is, and you just you see, I mean, youngsters have got it tough
Hmm.
now in many ways. You look at these youngsters who are caught up in the care system, um, and you think, and I mean, there are poverty issues again. We thought we'd seen the back of that, I think that that kind of nurture of the younger generations, that's important, that we need to put effort into that, and show that uh, lives that are not necessarily affluent can still be rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, before we say cheerio, Donald, I thought
sure,
we should remind people again where they can find out the
sure.
program for this year.
Yeah, so www.Scottish International Storytelling Festival.co.uk. If you Google that, you get right into the programme all across Scotland. You can comb through the beautiful illustrated programme. That's another thing with storytelling. There's a lovely relationship with the illustrators. They say it's the pictures in your mind. So illustrators like to illustrate those stories, that's a lovely part of it. So you see all that, but then you can actually go on to the booking system and you see every single event information about it, wherever it is, and you can either book directly there or it sends you to the local venue to book. And yeah, and as for people to find what's interesting to them. And there's things we've got BSL storytelling events that are led by BSL
Mhm.
or led by Scots or led by Gaelic. So in the mix there, for people for whom that is their primary languages, there's some free online stuff. If you can't get to an event or you're in the hoose, as it were, that doesn't cut you out. You can still go on and get a live stream of one of the open hearths or whatever, and get a wee bit of the atmosphere from home. Yeah, and it'll be a good couple of weeks.
I bet it will. Donald, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. It really has.
No, lovely to meet you, Alistair.
And all the very best with the festival and whatever you get up to in the future.
Good
With
man,
all those
good man.
Glanwains too.
Same to you. Same to
Yeah.
you. Good night now.
And
Take care.
we'll be back soon with someone completely different.